When I entered the room, the alien girl was Breathless. Mom, it's him. The human walked through the massive gates of the alien palace, his boots echoing against the polished floors. He had been briefed many times before, told to remain calm, to observe, to follow orders. But nothing could have prepared him for the sight waiting inside. The room was unlike anything he had ever imagined. Towering walls shimmered with colors that shifted with every movement, lights pulsing in a rhythm almost like a heartbeat. Strange symbols floated in the air, projecting patterns that seemed alive, bending reality slightly as they swirled. And at the center of the room, surrounded by elegant silvery chairs, stood a young alien girl. She froze the moment she saw him. Her large eyes, glowing faintly in the dim light, widened beyond what seemed possible. Her lips parted, and for a moment she could not speak. Her small hands clenched at her sides, and she took a sharp breath, as if the air itself had become heavy. Her mother, seated beside her, noticed the sudden shift in her daughter and frowned. "Mom, it's him," the girl whispered. Her voice trembled, almost lost in the ambient hum of the chamber. She could barely meet the human's gaze, yet something deep inside told her she already knew him. Not in the way someone knew a friend or a teacher, but as if she had been waiting for this moment all her life. The human stopped a few feet away, sensing the tension. He did not smile, did not reach out, did not make any sudden movement. He simply looked at her and the mother beside her, trying to understand why a simple visit, a routine inspection of this alien world, had caused such a profound reaction. The mother's eyes narrowed. She had been warned about humans, told countless stories about their unpredictability. Humans were weak by their standards. They were young, fragile, and incapable of surviving without machines, without their tiny home planet's protection. Yet here he was, standing in their royal chamber, calm, composed, completely unafraid of the towering architecture or the strange, hovering guardians that flanked the walls. "Who are you?" the mother asked. Her voice was firm, commanding, yet beneath the surface there was an unease she could not hide. The human inclined his head slightly. "I am Jace," he said, his voice steady. "I come as an envoy, a representative of my world. I mean no harm." The girl's eyes never left him. "No harm," she repeated, almost to herself. Her mind raced, trying to reconcile the image before her with the visions she had been shown since she was a child. In those visions, a human had appeared, always at a moment of great need, always standing firm when everything else faltered. And now he was here in flesh and bone, breathing in the same air, walking the same floor. The shock left her momentarily unable to move. "Mother," she whispered again, clutching at the edge of her chair, "he's the one." The mother's frown deepened. She had never allowed her daughter to speak of these visions aloud. The human world was distant, almost a myth, yet her daughter's reaction could not be ignored. Something about him was real, dangerous perhaps, but real. The human took another step forward, careful to show no aggression. Every movement was deliberate, every expression neutral. He had trained for this. Humans were known for improvisation, for thinking in ways other species did not. But he had learned to observe first, to understand before acting. Here, in this alien chamber, he could sense the curiosity radiating from every corner. But there was more, there was fear, subtle but undeniable. The aliens believed themselves superior, invincible in their technology, their intellect, their long history. And yet they hesitated in his presence. The girl swallowed hard. She had never experienced fear like this before, not fear of a human, but awe, recognition, and disbelief all rolled into one. Her mother's hand rested lightly on her shoulder, steadying her, yet even the mother could not hide the tension coiling inside her. "Jace," the mother said finally, speaking directly to him, "you have arrived at a critical moment. Your timing, it is unprecedented." The human nodded slowly. "I was sent when I was needed," he replied simply. He did not elaborate, knowing that to explain too much too soon could be dangerous. The alien world had rules, customs, and expectations he barely understood. Every word he spoke was being judged, every gesture analyzed. And yet he remained calm, because he had something the aliens did not expect: certainty. Humans, he had learned, were often underestimated because they refused to be predictable. The girl's eyes were wide, her breathing still uneven. They said humans would never reach here," she murmured. They said you were impossible." The human tilted his head, a slight curiosity in his expression. "Impossible?" he asked. The girl nodded, still staring at him. "Yes, my people, They believed no human could survive the journeys, the dangers, and yet here you are. Her voice faltered, caught between fear and excitement. She glanced at her mother, as if seeking permission to speak freely, but the mother only gave a subtle nod, cautious but understanding. The human glanced around the room, noticing the floating symbols, the subtle defenses, the quiet whispers of advisors hidden behind the walls. Every detail told him something about this society, about their priorities, their fears, and their weaknesses. And yet the most important detail was the girl. Her reaction was unique, unprecedented. She did not fear him in the usual sense. She recognized him. "Why do you look at me that way?" he asked gently. He did not demand an answer, but his curiosity was genuine. He had faced countless alien cultures, but never one where a single individual's recognition could hold so much weight. The girl took a deep breath, steadying herself. You were in my dreams," she said finally, voice trembling but clear. "For years I've seen a human, someone like you, standing when everything else fell, and now you are here." The mother's eyes widened slightly, a rare break in her composure. She had thought those dreams were mere superstition, an old story passed down through generations. But now, faced with reality, she had to reconsider. The humans might be more than a curiosity. They might be a threat, or a key. The human studied the girl, then her mother. "I am no threat," he said again calmly, "but I do not ignore what is happening around me. I am here because something must change." The girl's lips parted in surprise. She had expected arrogance, demands, or threats. Instead, he spoke with quiet assurance. His presence was neither commanding nor fearful. It simply existed, and that alone unsettled her. The mother rose from her chair, moving closer to the girl. "You speak as though you understand human, do you?" she asked. Jace met her gaze steadily. "I understand that your world faces challenges. I understand that my presence here is not by chance. And I understand that the choices made today will shape tomorrow." The alien advisors whispered among themselves, confusion and doubt flickering across their faces. They were used to control, to predicting outcomes, to bending other species to their will. Yet here was a human, calm and deliberate, navigating their chamber, speaking with authority not granted by them but inherent in his very being. The girl felt her heart race. She wanted to run to him, to speak, to ask 1,000 questions, but she could not. Her body refused. Her mind spun with memories of dreams, prophecies, and warnings, and yet beneath the fear there was excitement, a hope that she could not name. The human took another step closer, stopping at a respectful distance. "I will not interfere unnecessarily," he said, "but I cannot stand by if I see wrong. That is not who we are." The mother's expression softened slightly, though her caution remained. She could see it now. Humans were different in ways her people had not considered. Not because they had greater weapons nor superior intellect, but because of resilience. They survived, they adapted, and most importantly, they refused to be broken by fear. The girl's eyes shone, a mixture of wonder and disbelief. I never imagined this," she whispered. Her mother placed a firm hand on her shoulder, grounding her, yet even she felt the stirrings of something profound. "Then you must watch closely," the human said, voice calm but insistent, "because what happens next will matter more than anything you have known." The room fell silent for a moment, the only sound the gentle hum of energy flowing through the chamber. The girl's heart pounded. Her mother's eyes never left the human. And Jace, the human, simply stood there, waiting, observing, knowing that the next moments would define not just this encounter, but the fate of worlds. And for the first time, the girl realized that humans were not just fragile creatures of a small blue planet. They were unpredictable, unstoppable. And perhaps the universe had underestimated them for far too long. The air in the royal chamber had grown heavier, thick with uncertainty. Jace stood quietly, letting the tension settle like a storm cloud before it broke. The girl, still trembling, held her mother's hand tightly, eyes fixed on him as if trying to decipher a puzzle she had only partially solved. The mother's expression was unreadable, her thoughts hidden behind a veil of authority. Yet inside, she could not ignore the ripples of unease spreading through the council members who had gathered silently around the room. The advisors whispered in low tones, their words flickering like shadows in the shimmering light. They debated what to do with this human who had arrived unannounced and unafraid. Some argued that he should be detained, examined, and perhaps removed entirely. Others, more cautious, suggested observing him, attempting communication, or even understanding why he was here. None of them, however, expected the reaction from the girl. She had been trained to hide her emotions, to obey protocol, to fear nothing that could threaten their system. But this human had shattered all of that. "Mother," the girl whispered again, her voice barely audible. He is not ordinary. He is the one from the visions, the one who stands when all falls. I know it. I can feel it." The mother's grip on her daughter's hand tightened slightly. She looked toward Jace, her eyes narrowing with a mixture of curiosity and caution. "And you are?" she asked. "Why do you come here? What do you seek from us?" Jace straightened, his posture calm and deliberate. "I come because the universe is changing," he said. "Because your world, like many others, faces forces it cannot control alone. I am here to observe, to understand, and to act if necessary. I do not seek to dominate. I seek to ensure that destruction does not claim what should survive." The girl's eyes widened. She had never heard a human speak with such confidence, such clarity, without arrogance or threat. It was unsettling, yes, but it was also inspiring. The visions had shown her a human like this, someone who would not yield, someone whose presence alone could alter the course of events. And now he was here, speaking with a calm that made even the most seasoned advisors pause. One of the older council members, his skin a deep shade of violet and his eyes reflecting centuries of experience, stepped forward. His voice was low but carried authority. "You speak of understanding, human, yet you trespass into matters beyond your reach. Do you truly grasp the nature of this world, its history, its struggles?" Jace looked at him steadily. "I do not claim to understand everything," he replied. "But I have learned one thing. Survival depends not on knowledge alone, but on action, on courage, and on the will to endure. You may know your history, but how you face what comes next will define your future, not the past." The council member's expression hardened. He had faced threats before, even humans in theory, but never one who spoke with such composure and certainty. "And if we do not choose your way?" he asked sharply. "What then?" Jace's gaze did not waver. "Then your choices will shape your world as they always have. But understand this, change is coming, and it does not wait for permission." The girl's heart raced as she listened. She had always known that humans were resilient, that somehow they endured, but hearing it spoken aloud made the truth undeniable. Her mother, too, was struck by the human's words. She had trained her daughter to value logic, discipline, and obedience above all else. Yet here was a being whose strength was not in force, not in technology, but in the sheer certainty of his will. The room was silent for a long moment. Even the advisors, who had spent centuries mastering control and strategy, found themselves holding their breath. The energy of the chamber seemed to bend slightly around the human, as if it recognized something foreign and unstoppable. The girl finally spoke, her voice stronger now, though still tinged with awe. "Mother, he is different. He is not like any human I have seen in records or visions. He is more." Her mother nodded slowly. "I see it," she said quietly. "But be careful, child. Power is not always benevolent. Humans are unpredictable." Jace observed their exchange quietly. He understood the subtle dynamics at play. Fear, caution, awe, respect. These were the currents that shaped alien societies, yet he also recognized an opportunity. If he could demonstrate humanity's resilience and ingenuity, he could show them that humans were not simply fragile creatures to be dismissed. "Tell me," Jace said, turning his attention to the girl. "You have seen visions. You know of what I am capable. What is it that you expect from me?" The girl hesitated, her mind spinning. She had never spoken these words aloud, fearing disbelief or scorn. But now, standing in the presence of the one she had always known would arrive, she felt compelled to speak. I expect you to survive, to stand when all else falls, and to change what seems unchangeable." Jace nodded. "Then I will do my best," he said. "But understand, change is not simple, it is not easy. It will demand choices that may frighten you, even if you know they are necessary." The mother's expression grew serious. "You speak as though you understand sacrifice, human, do you?" Jace looked at her, his gaze unwavering. "I understand that survival often comes at a cost. I understand that courage is not the absence of fear, but the ability to act despite it. And I understand that the smallest decision can ripple across worlds." The council murmured among themselves. This human, simple in appearance, was speaking truths that challenged everything they had believed about strength, power, and survival. And yet he was not threatening, not demanding, simply stating what he knew to be true. The girl's hand trembled slightly as she gripped her mother's. "Mother, we cannot ignore him," she whispered. He is different. He is human, yes, but he is something more. I feel it. Her mother's eyes softened, though the caution remained. Perhaps, she said quietly, but we must observe carefully. Humans are clever, adaptable, and persistent. One wrong step, and we could regret underestimating them. Jace stepped closer, carefully, ensuring no sudden movements. I am not here to dominate, he said. But I am here to act where action is needed. If your world faces danger, I will face it with you. But I cannot ignore what is coming. It will not wait for us to prepare. The girl's eyes filled with awe. She had imagined this moment countless times, yet reality surpassed every vision. Humans, she realized, were not just strong physically. They were strong in ways that defied prediction. Their courage, their resilience, their refusal to bow before fear or expectation, it was a force in itself. The mother regarded him carefully, weighing her options. She had trained her daughter to obey, to respect protocol, and to trust in the power of their civilization. But now she was seeing a new possibility, a human who could teach them something they had never known, something their technology and experience could not provide. The council continued to watch, some skeptical, some intrigued. They had believed humanity to be a minor species, incapable of affecting interstellar politics. And yet here was Jace, standing unafraid, commanding attention without force, speaking truths that no advanced machine or weapon could replicate. Perhaps we should test him, one advisor suggested, his voice cautious. Not with violence, but with challenge. Let us see if he truly understands what it means to survive, to endure, to act when all else fails. Jace nodded. I am ready, he said simply. Challenge me and I will respond. But know this, my way may not match yours and my solutions may seem unconventional. That is how humans survive. That is how we endure. The girl's eyes sparkled. I always knew humans were strong, she whispered. But I never imagined, like this. Her mother's hand rested on her shoulder, a silent acknowledgement that the human's presence had already begun to change something fundamental in their society. And as Jace stood in the chamber, calm and composed, the advisors could not help but sense the truth. Humans were not merely fragile creatures of a distant planet. They were unpredictable, resilient, and in ways that mattered most, unstoppable. The girl's heart raced. She had been told humans were small, weak, insignificant, and yet in that moment she understood why her visions had chosen him. Humans were more than survival. They were a force of change, a spark that could ignite even the oldest empires. Jace finally spoke, his voice quiet but firm. The choices you make now will define what comes next. Do you act out of fear or do you act with courage? That will determine everything. The room fell silent again, the only sound the low hum of energy flowing through the chamber. The girl's eyes met his, her breath steadying as awe and understanding filled her. The mother's gaze lingered on him, thoughtful, cautious, yet recognizing something undeniable. And for the first time, the council, the mother, and the girl realized a profound truth. Humans were not ordinary. They were not easily controlled, predicted, or dismissed. They survived. They adapted. They endured. And sometimes they arrived exactly when the universe needed them most. The air shifted. The tension remained, but now there was possibility, hope, and the understanding that what they had once thought impossible was, in fact, standing right before them. The days following Jace's arrival were tense. The Alien Council had called urgent meetings, convening in chambers deep beneath the palace, where walls glowed with faint pulses of energy, reflecting centuries of authority. The girl, Kayla, watched quietly from a corner, her curiosity pulling her toward Jace even as caution warned her to stay hidden. Her mother, Princess Lyra, sat among the council, her posture rigid, yet her mind could not escape the human who had so easily unsettled them all. Some advisors argued that Jace was a threat, that humans were unpredictable and dangerous. They insisted he should be confined, observed through controlled simulations, or even forced to leave the planet. Others hesitated. There were signs in the girl, in the mother's reactions, in the subtle shifts in energy around him, that this human was different, that he was capable, and that meant the council could not underestimate him. One of the older council members, a tall alien with skin that shimmered like liquid silver, slammed a fist against the table. We cannot let him stay here. One human is enough to destabilize the court. Look at what he has done merely by standing in our presence. Another advisor, smaller but sharp-eyed, spoke cautiously. And yet, what if he is the key to what we cannot achieve ourselves? Kayla has seen visions, yes, but we dismiss them as myths. What if they were warnings or guidance? Lyra's gaze fell on her daughter. Kayla's eyes, wide with awe and fear, reflected the flickering lights above. I do not know, Lyra admitted softly, but I sense that this human is not ordinary. I do not trust what I feel, yet I cannot deny it. Kayla could barely contain herself. She wanted to run to Jace to speak, to explain what she had seen in the visions. She wanted to warn him, to guide him, to share the knowledge she had been given since she was a child. But every instinct screamed that this was not the moment. She had to observe, to understand, to protect the balance of her world, even as curiosity pulled her toward the human who had so effortlessly captured her attention. Jace, meanwhile, was patient. He observed the discussions, listened carefully, and waited for the right moment. He knew that rushing into arguments, trying to impose solutions, would only create resistance. Humans had a way of achieving results not by confrontation alone, but by demonstrating capability and resolve in the face of doubt. Later, when the council dispersed for the evening, Kayla approached him cautiously. "Why do they fear you so?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Jace studied her, noting the subtle tension in her body, the curiosity in her eyes, the hesitation in her tone. "They fear what they do not understand," he said simply. "Humans are unusual in ways they cannot measure. We survive when others would falter, we act when others hesitate, and we endure what others would flee from." Kayla shivered. The words were simple, yet they carried weight far beyond their meaning. "I have seen it," she said quietly. "In visions, in dreams, you were always there, standing when everything else fell." Jace nodded slowly. "Then you know the truth," he said. "We do not always fight with weapons. Sometimes we fight with patience, with courage, with choices. And sometimes just being present is enough to change what happens next." The next morning, the council convened again, but this time with a more urgent purpose. A rival faction within the court, sensing an opportunity, had challenged Jace's presence openly. They accused him of espionage, of manipulation, of subtly influencing Kayla and Lyra for reasons unknown. The humans' calmness in the face of these accusations only inflamed them further. One of the faction leaders, a stern figure with eyes like molten gold, stepped forward. "You claim to be an envoy, yet you manipulate our princess and her daughter with words and presence alone. Who are you to interfere in our affairs?" Jace did not flinch. He spoke with measured authority, every word deliberate. "I interfere only where I see imbalance. I have no interest in domination or control, but I will act where action is necessary. That is the human way. We act when others hesitate, we endure when others falter, and we adapt when circumstances demand it." The council murmured, some scoffing, others silent. They had faced threats, betrayals, and internal conflict before. Yet they had never encountered a being who commanded attention without force, who unsettled without aggression. Humans were not supposed to affect alien politics so profoundly, and yet Jace did. Kayla watched him closely, her heart pounding. She had never seen anyone like him. In her visions, humans were survivors, but now she understood that survival meant more than enduring. It meant acting decisively, thinking creatively, and refusing to yield. Her mother's eyes flicked to Jace, a mixture of concern and admiration. Lyra had trained her daughter to follow protocol, to trust in logic and hierarchy, yet she could not ignore the subtle power radiating from this human. The rival faction intensified their accusations. "He undermines our authority," one cried. "He corrupts our traditions." "He is dangerous." Jace raised a hand slightly, a gesture that demanded attention without intimidation. "Danger is often subjective," he said calmly. "What you call danger, I call opportunity. You see threats because you measure the world by control and fear. Humans measure the world by survival and action, and survival often requires choice, not certainty." The room fell silent. The words were simple, yet their implications were profound. The council had always believed that power came from control, control over resources, over people, over information. And yet here was a human demonstrating power without control, influence without force. It was unsettling. Kayla felt a surge of hope and fear together. Hope that this human could change what was coming, fear that his presence alone might provoke conflict she could not prevent. Her mother's hand rested lightly on her shoulder, grounding her even as the world seemed to tilt around them. The next challenge came unexpectedly. Reports arrived from the outer sectors of the planetary system. An unknown force had begun moving toward their world, a fleet of machines long thought extinct. The council scrambled, activating defenses, deploying sensors, and convening emergency meetings. Panic rippled through the ranks. This was a threat beyond anything their strategies had prepared for. Jace observed the chaos calmly. He could see the errors in their plans, the gaps in their understanding, the rigid patterns that would fail under true pressure. Humans, he knew, often faced insurmountable odds and survived not because they were stronger, but because they adapted. And adaptation required action that others might call reckless. Lyra looked at him, desperation in her eyes. "What do we do?" she asked. "Our defenses, they will not hold." Jace's gaze swept across the holographic maps of the system. "You rely too heavily on technology alone," he said. "Machines follow rules, but humans and other life adapt. We can use what you have in ways you do not anticipate. We can survive this, but you must be willing to act differently than you have before." The rival faction protested. "We cannot follow his guidance. He is an outsider." Jace turned to them, his eyes steady. "You can choose to resist. You can choose to fall. But if you want to survive, you will need to trust that action and flexibility are sometimes stronger than rigid control. The choice is yours." Kayla's heart raced. She understood now why the visions had shown him. Humans were not just strong physically. They were strong because they thought differently, because they acted when others hesitated, because they endured. And now, faced with a crisis that could destroy their world, the human presence was more than symbolic. It was essential. For hours, Jace guided the council in reorganizing defenses, combining their advanced technology with strategies that seemed unconventional to them. He suggested redundant systems, creative deployment of energy shields, and even using the terrain of the planet itself to offset the attacking fleet's advantages. Every proposal was met with skepticism, yet slowly, the council began to see results. Machines that should have failed began holding. Patterns that should have collapsed remained stable, and all the while, Jace's calm presence inspired confidence even among the most doubtful advisors. The girl watched in awe. She had never imagined that one human could influence events so profoundly. The mother, too, began to see the truth. Humans were not merely fragile creatures to be observed from a distance. They were agents of change, capable of survival, adaptability, and influence in ways the oldest empires could not predict. As the first wave of the approaching threat reached the outer sectors, the council realized they had a chance, not just to survive, but to turn the tide. And standing at the center of this new hope was Jace, the human, calm and unwavering, demonstrating once again that humanity's true strength lay not in dominance or weapons, but in courage, resilience, and the refusal to yield when faced with the impossible. Kayla felt a surge of certainty. The human in front of her was the one from her visions, the one who stood when all else fell. And now, in real time, she understood why. He was not just a survivor. He was a force of change, unstoppable in ways that no prophecy or technology could measure. The rival faction watched with unease, realizing that their attempts to discredit him had failed. Their power alone could not counteract the influence of a human who acted decisively, calmly, and wisely under pressure. And as the first skirmishes began in the outer sectors, it became clear to everyone in the chamber. The human presence had shifted the balance. Survival was now possible, not because of superior machines or overwhelming numbers, but because of the resilience and ingenuity that humans brought to the universe. And for the first time, Kayla's mother admitted quietly to herself, this human might be the one to change the fate of their world. The alarms rang through the palace, a sharp, insistent warning that could not be ignored. Energy shields flickered, defensive systems roared to life, and the advisors scrambled to their stations. Outside, the alien fleet faced an enemy unlike any they had ever encountered, machines that moved faster than predicted, attacking with precision and relentlessness. The humans' old tactics, the Council's long-tested strategies, even their advanced technology seemed insufficient. Panic rippled through the command rooms. Jay stood quietly in the command center, surveying the chaos. Every indicator, every sensor, every report fed him a single, clear conclusion. The aliens were strong, yes, but rigid. Their strength lay in control, in hierarchy, in patterns that could be anticipated. Their enemy thrived on unpredictability, exploiting weaknesses that even centuries of experience could not account for. And here, as he watched the chaos unfold, he knew why humans survived when others did not. They adapted. They thought differently. They acted decisively when hesitation would be fatal. Lyra, standing beside him, felt her heart pound. The crisis had escalated far beyond anything she had imagined. Her advisors were shouting conflicting orders, machines were failing, and the enemy was relentless. She looked at Jace, her eyes wide with fear and hope all at once. "Can we survive this?" she asked. Jace's gaze remained calm, steady. "Yes," he said simply, "but not the way you are trying. You rely too much on rigid patterns, on hierarchy, on expectation. Adaptability is what will save you. Quick thinking, redundancy, and action where it is least expected." Kayla stood slightly behind her mother, watching him intently. Her visions had shown her humans standing in impossible situations, and now she understood why. It was not physical strength alone, nor technology. It was mindset, courage, and the refusal to accept defeat. She felt her heart swell with certainty. This human could save them. The first wave of the enemy fleet struck the outer orbital stations. Explosions rocked the hulls, lights flickered, and chaos threatened to consume the command centers. The council members panicked, shouting orders over one another, each convinced that their individual strategy was best. But Jace remained focused, observing every weakness, every blind spot, every flaw in their defenses. "Listen," he said, finally raising his voice above the din. "The stations are too rigid. Energy shields in a single pattern will fail. Spread the power, rotate the shields, use the orbital gravity to your advantage. Move your fleets unpredictably. Force them to adapt, or they will break themselves against your defenses." The room went quiet for a moment, the advisors staring at him as if he had spoken in a language they barely understood. Then a few of the braver ones began implementing his instructions. They moved fleets differently, adjusted shield grids, and coordinated attacks in ways that defied their normal protocol. Slowly, imperceptibly at first, the tide began to shift. Kayla watched, heart pounding, as the humans' instructions transformed the battlefield. Explosions still rocked the stations, yet the enemy attacks began to falter. They expected patterns, predictable defenses, but humans and those who followed their thinking refused to be predictable. Jace's calm presence radiated through the command room, steadying the council even as chaos raged around them. Lyra clenched her fists. She had underestimated humans. Not their strength, not their technology, but their mind. Their resilience, their clarity under pressure, their ability to act when others hesitated. She saw her daughter's eyes wide with wonder, and she understood why the visions had always chosen this human. Humans were capable of survival and change in ways no other species could achieve. The enemy adapted quickly, however. They were relentless, learning from every failed attack, probing for weaknesses in the new strategy. The council grew anxious, fear creeping back into their movements. Machines that should have protected them faltered, energy fields weakened, and some orbital stations reported critical failures. Jace moved calmly among the advisors, speaking directly to Lyra. "Your defenses are strong, but your rigidity will fail you. Machines and patterns are predictable. Humans survive because we do not follow patterns blindly. Use what you have in ways you cannot predict. Trust in action and adaptability, not tradition alone." Lyra's voice was steady, though her hands trembled slightly. "What do we do, human? The outer sectors are failing. Their machines are overwhelming our fleets." Jace turned toward the main display, analyzing the enemy formations. "We will divide our resources strategically. Not all ships need to engage directly. Use decoys, feints, and indirect attacks. Sacrifice where necessary to preserve what matters most. You will lose some, yes, but you will save the critical points that determine survival." Kayla's heart raced. She understood what he meant. The human was not afraid of loss. Survival was not about avoiding danger entirely, but about making choices that ensured the continuation of life, of purpose, of what truly mattered. She had never realized how radical such thinking could be to her people, who valued preservation above all. The council hesitated. Sacrifice was difficult to consider. Their society had always avoided risk, their culture built around minimizing loss. Yet here was a human, calmly suggesting calculated losses, calculated risks, as the only path to survival. Slowly, some began to implement his ideas, adjusting fleets, repositioning energy grids, and preparing for the next wave of attacks. The battle outside escalated. Orbital stations rocked violently under enemy fire, explosions lighting the void of space. Yet with every adjustment Jace suggested, the alien fleets adapted faster, countering attacks in ways that had seemed impossible only hours before. Kayla watched the human, awestruck. She had expected heroism, bravery, survival, but what she witnessed was strategy, clarity, and vision. Humans did not merely fight. They analyzed, they adapted, they turned chaos into opportunity. And slowly, against overwhelming odds, the tide began to turn. The enemy launched a massive strike at the central station, the hub controlling planetary defenses. Panic spread among the council members. This station could not fail, yet it was under direct assault, the shields weakening, weapons systems failing. Jace moved to the central console, hands moving over controls he barely understood but could intuitively direct. "Divert power from outer sectors," he commanded. "Use the station's gravitational control to redirect enemy formations. Synchronize shields in rotation. Focus fire where it matters, not where it is expected." The advisors, hesitant at first, followed his instructions. Slowly, imperceptibly, the massive strike began to falter. Enemy formations collided, machines destroyed each other in their confusion, and the shields held. The central station, the key to survival, remained intact. Kayla's breath caught. She had never seen such a display of human ingenuity and courage. Her visions had hinted at it, but now it was real, tangible, unfolding before her eyes. Her mother's gaze softened, respect replacing fear. Humans, she realized, were more than visitors. They were catalysts, changing the outcome of events simply by acting decisively, calmly, and wisely. The battle continued through the day and into the night, yet the alien forces, guided by Jace's strategies, began to gain the upper hand. The enemy, though formidable and relentless, could not predict the unpredictable. They had not accounted for humans, for their resilience, their courage, their ability to adapt. Slowly but surely, the tide shifted. By the end of the battle, the enemy fleet was forced to retreat, suffering massive losses. The alien council, exhausted but victorious, turned to Jace, their expressions a mix of awe, relief, and disbelief. The human had not only guided them to survival, but had done so by teaching them something they had never understood. Survival is not in rigid control. It is in adaptability, courage, and the willingness to act decisively in the face of fear. Kayla stepped forward, her eyes shining. "You did it," she said softly. "You saved them, you saved everyone," Jace smiled faintly. "We saved them together," he replied. "I only guided, you and your people acted. Courage and adaptation are universal, are not mine alone." Lyra approached him, her expression filled with gratitude and newfound understanding. "I underestimated humanity," she admitted. "I thought your kind, fragile, weak, incapable of influencing the course of empires, but you have proven otherwise." Jace nodded. "Humans endure. We adapt, we survive, and sometimes, when needed, we arrive exactly when change is required." Kayla felt her heart swell. She had waited for this moment, dreamed of it, and now it was real. Humans were not simply survivors. They were catalysts, forces of change, and she understood why the visions had shown her this human. His presence had shifted the fate of their world, had shown them that survival was possible even in the face of overwhelming odds. The council slowly regained composure, acknowledging the reality they had resisted for so long. Humans were not to be dismissed, not to be underestimated, and perhaps not merely to be feared. They were something different. Something powerful in ways no technology, no tradition, no empire could measure. And as the human, calm and composed, surveyed the recovering systems, Kayla understood a simple truth. Survival was not about avoiding danger entirely, but about acting decisively, thinking creatively, and enduring what others could not. Humans did not merely survive, they changed everything they touched. The aftermath of the battle left the palace buzzing with cautious relief. Outside, the alien fleets repaired their damaged stations, energy fields hummed steadily, and communications began to return to normal. The enemy had retreated, leaving devastation in their wake, but the greatest shock was not the destruction. It was the realization that the human, Jace, had not only guided them to survival, but had changed the way their world thought about power, resilience, and strategy. Kayla walked through the palace corridors, her mind replaying every moment of the battle. She remembered the fear, the chaos, the desperation, and how Jace's calm presence had turned it all around. Her visions had shown her this moment, but she had never imagined how real it would feel. His choices, his clarity, and his courage had shaped the outcome in ways her people could not have imagined. Her mother, Princess Lyra, followed quietly. She had been forced to rethink everything she had believed about humans, about power, and about prophecy. The council had slowly begun to accept the truth. Humans were not fragile, nor were they limited by their size or technology. Humans survived because they acted when others hesitated, adapted when others failed, and endured when others would collapse. They were unpredictable, unstoppable in ways the oldest empires could not measure. Jace stood in the central hall, observing the aftermath. He was calm, but his presence commanded attention. The council members approached him one by one, their expressions a mixture of respect, disbelief, and newfound understanding. They had faced countless crises over centuries, but none had tested their assumptions like this. They had assumed superiority, yet here was a human showing them that survival and strength were not measured by technology or tradition alone. They were measured by action, courage, and adaptability. The senior council member, the one with the liquid silver skin who had opposed him before, stepped forward. His voice was steady, though there was a hint of awe. "We were wrong to underestimate you," he admitted. "Your presence, your guidance, it has changed the outcome of this crisis. Humans are more than we imagined." Jace inclined his head slightly. "Humans survive," he said simply. "We adapt, we endure, and sometimes we arrive when we are needed most. But this was not my victory alone. You acted, your people acted, I only guided." Lyra approached, her eyes meeting his. She had seen the calm certainty in him, the clarity that had steadied everyone in the face of overwhelming odds. I misjudged your kind," she admitted. "I believed humans were fragile, that we could control or dismiss you. But you have proven something extraordinary. You are a force of change, not because of strength alone, but because of will, courage, and resilience." Kayla stepped closer, her gaze fixed on him. "I always knew," she said softly. "I saw it in visions, but seeing it with my own eyes, it is beyond anything I imagined. Humans, you survive when all else falls. You adapt when others cannot. You endure and you inspire." Jace smiled faintly. "Then the visions were right," he said. "I am here because it was necessary, but humans survive because we act, not because we are invincible. Every species faces limits. We simply find ways to overcome them." The council began discussing the broader consequences. The enemy fleet had retreated, but the threat they represented was still out there, waiting. Without human guidance, the council realized they would not have survived. They had relied on centuries of rigid strategy, rules, and control, and it had nearly failed them. Jace had shown them that adaptability, courage, and decisive action could overcome even the most overwhelming odds. Kayla felt a surge of pride. She had waited for this moment, dreamed of it, and now it was real. Humans were not just visitors, they were catalysts. They could change outcomes, shift destinies, and redefine what was possible. She realized why her visions had chosen him. Not because he was extraordinary in the usual sense, but because he represented something her people had long forgotten: resilience, hope, and the ability to act when all seemed lost. Lyra stood beside her daughter, watching Jace with a mixture of admiration and caution. She had trained her daughter to value discipline, protocol, and caution above all else. But now she understood that there was another kind of strength, one that humans possessed naturally: the ability to endure, to think creatively, and to inspire others to rise above fear. The senior council member spoke again, addressing the room. "We have underestimated humanity for too long," he said. "Your presence here has proven that survival is not measured by strength alone, but by adaptability, courage, and decisive action. The galaxy may have more to learn from your kind than we ever imagined." Jace nodded. "The galaxy is vast," he said. "Humans are not the only survivors, but we endure in ways others cannot always predict. That is what makes us valuable, not only to ourselves, but to those who face challenges too great to overcome alone." Kayla's eyes shone. "I understand now," she said. "It is why you were always in my visions. You are not here to dominate, not here to conquer. You are here to survive, to act when others cannot, and to change what seems unchangeable." Lyra placed a hand on her daughter's shoulder, acknowledging the truth. "And you, human, have reminded us all of what courage and resilience truly mean," she said. "Perhaps humanity's greatest power is not in weapons, not in technology, but in its ability to endure, adapt, and act decisively." The council members, once skeptical and fearful, now nodded in agreement. They had faced centuries of threats, but none had tested their assumptions like this human. They had assumed superiority, yet Jace had shown them that strength was more than numbers, more than technology. It was mindset, will, and courage. Kayla stepped closer to him. "What happens next?" she asked. "The enemy fleet, they will return, won't they?" Jace's gaze was steady. "They may return, but now your people are prepared. You have learned that survival depends not only on power, but on flexibility, courage, and the ability to act when others hesitate. You can endure, and when the time comes, you will act again, stronger and wiser." Lyra's eyes softened. "You have changed the way we see ourselves, human," she said. "You have reminded us that survival is not merely about technology or rules. It is about courage, action, and resilience. Perhaps your presence here was more than chance. Perhaps it was destiny." Kayla smiled, understanding the weight of her mother's words. "Yes," she said, "and I finally understand why I felt breathless the moment I saw you. Humans, you are extraordinary not because of power, but because of your ability to endure, to act, and to inspire hope when all seems lost." Jace looked at her and then at Lyra. "Humans survive," he said simply, "and sometimes that is enough to change everything." The council slowly dispersed, each member reflecting on the lessons learned. The alien world had faced near destruction, yet they had survived, not through superior firepower or technology alone, but through adaptability, courage, and decisive action guided by an outsider they had once underestimated. Jace had shown them that humans were not fragile, not insignificant, and not predictable. They were resilient, resourceful, and capable of influencing outcomes far beyond their own planet. Kayla stayed beside Jace, her eyes filled with admiration. "I never thought humans could be like this," she said softly. "Not just strong, but capable of changing the course of empires with courage and wisdom alone." Jace smiled faintly. "Strength comes in many forms," he said. "Humans endure, we adapt, we act. And sometimes that is all it takes to ensure survival and inspire change." Lyra nodded, understanding fully for the first time. Her daughter's visions had not been warnings, they had been guidance. Humans were not invaders, not conquerors. They were catalysts for change, capable of ensuring survival where others would fail. The Alien Council formally recognized the human presence, offering gratitude and acknowledgement. The world had survived because of him, and the lessons learned would shape future generations. Humans, it seemed, were more than mere visitors. They were a force of hope, a symbol of resilience, and a reminder that courage and action could triumph where technology and tradition alone might falter. Kayla's hand brushed against Jace's arm. "Thank you," she said softly. "For surviving, for acting, for reminding us what it means to endure." Jace's gaze met hers. "Humans survive," he repeated, "and sometimes that is enough to change everything." The sun set over the alien world, casting long shadows across the palace. The threat had been repelled, the enemy driven back, and the lesson learned. Humanity's presence had changed the outcome, not through domination, but through resilience, courage, and the refusal to give up. The galaxy had witnessed something extraordinary, a human who acted decisively, who endured when all else trembled, and who reminded others that survival and hope were not about fear, but about action. Kayla watched the horizon, her heart filled with certainty and hope. The visions had been fulfilled, not as mere prophecy, but as reality. Humans were extraordinary, capable of shaping events in ways no one could anticipate, capable of surviving when others could not, capable of inspiring hope and courage in even the oldest, most established empires. And as Jace looked at the horizon, calm and steady, he knew that his presence had not only changed this world, it had reminded all who witnessed it that humanity's true strength lay not in dominance or conquest, but in the courage to act, the resilience to endure, and the ability to inspire change where it was most needed.